Welcome to Control Development. Today, we're going to be building a web-based terminal in Svelte.js. Now, for episode 1, we're going to be doing the initial project setup, the Git repository, and making a few UI components to make the project look pretty so that it looks nice for the rest of the series. So with all that out of the way, we're just going to get started. We have the Svelte documentation up here. And what we can do first is use npx, which comes installed with Node. So if you have npm running, you probably have npx available. We can run npx degit svelte.js/template, and then whatever you want to call the project. We're going to call this one web terminal. We're going to cd into that directory and switch into TypeScript mode using this command, node scripts setup TypeScript.js. So now we're in TypeScript. We can go ahead and install our dependencies. And lastly, we'll go ahead and build the bundle. So you can see that it has live reload enabled, so our browser will refresh automatically. And it also built a JavaScript file within public build and on bundle.js. This is the actual application file that gets served to us inside of index.html, which I'll show you in a bit. And we can see it's available on port 8080, which I already have open here. So we have our basic hello world up and running. We can open a new terminal tab over here and create a Git repository so we can easily manage our source code and revert any changes or mistakes we want to roll back. Going to change the branch name to main because we don't use the master branch anymore. Going to go ahead and add all these files and do our initial commit. Now, before we move on, I know a few of you are going to ask, what is this terminal called? It's called Warp. I believe you go to warp.dev. It's a new terminal built with Rust. It's super fast and lightweight, and also has some great commands built in. For example, it has AI command search. So it asks me what I want to do, and I could type in something like remove a folder called test. And I can hit enter, and it'll tell me the command I need to run to do what I'm looking to do. It's not always accurate, but it's pretty good. So again, that's warp.dev, and all you need to do is sign in with your GitHub account. Okay, so we have our Git repo created. We're on branch main. We're not going to do any sort of off branching. We're just going to stick on main for the purposes of this video. We can go ahead and open this up in VS Code. And we see our Svelte project. So I'm going to step through just a few things. If we come into public, we have our global CSS and our index.html. And apart from the boilerplate code here, you can see that we are adding a script of build/bundle.js, which is in this folder here, which is our Svelte application that was bundled in the build phase, just here. We'll go ahead and change our web page title, call it Web Terminal Svelte. I'm also going to quickly jump in and get ahead of the game and get rid of any padding on the body. I know that's going to be an issue later. Next, we can open up our source folder. We'll grab main.ts and app. So app is our current component, our only Svelte component we have at the moment. You can see we have our script tag up here. We have the HTML content, and then as well as a style tag. So for quickly in Svelte, all of the script and style tags inside of a component file are scoped to only that component, so they won't affect any other components on the page. We can see in main.ts, we import the app component and spin up a new instance of the app, appending it to the target of the document body. And then we also pass in some props. And in this case, we have world, the name prop with the value of world. So we can add some exclamation marks here. And if we go back to our browser, we can see it updates in real time. This is achieved by having the word export next to the variable name we're trying to populate. So you see if we get rid of export, you see it's undefined, no longer works. But when we bring export back, everything works as intended. So we're going to gut all this, keep the main, and we'll get rid of all the styles. And back in main.ts, we'll also get rid of the props there. I'm going to turn on screencast mode so that you guys will be able to see all of the commands I'm running and the typing at the bottom of the screen. For those wondering, I do use Vim to navigate and edit code. So if you see some strange commands, that's why. Okay, so let's get started. I have a general idea of what I want it to look like. It's got a full screen gradient background and then a floating terminal in the very center. So I'm going to get started on the gradient background first. So we will start off with an ID of root on the main, just so it's easily selectable. We'll come down here and create the root. So it needs to have a height of 100 VH, a width of 100 VW, and we're going to just test to make sure everything's up and running with a background color of red. And we do see red, and we have no weird padding or anything. So next, I'm going to show you an awesome site called cssgradient.io. And this lets you quickly build CSS gradient code without having to actually figure it out yourself. So I actually like the way this looks, this gradient. I could play around with the colors. I think I'm going to change this purple to be slightly darker, not too much. And yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to come down here, grab this code, paste it in, fix that up, and take a look at our project. That looks great. Looks fresh and modern. Gradients are kind of making a comeback, so I'm okay with the way this looks. Next, inside main, a section. I'm going to call this window. So one thing I've been thinking about before having started this video is that I want the terminal window to be opaque so that the gradient can kind of shine through, but all of the terminal content needs to have opacity of 1 and can't be transparent in any way. So I need to actually have two windows that are overlaid on top of each other. The background being the window that's sort of opaque, and then in front of it will be the actual terminal commands. So I'll show you now what I mean by that. So first thing, I'm going to use CSS Grid to easily position the window and the terminal. So we'll create our template columns of repeat 12 fractions, so 12 even columns across the page. And then likewise, we can do rows as well. So if we come in here, open up our console, we can click on grid on the right and we see the 12 by 12 grid. Next, we can grab our window selector. And this will have a position of grid call start. I'm just going to take a guess at 4. And then we can end at column 10. And we'll do the same for row and see how that looks. So we'll need a background color of black. And I'm going to try to use built-in colors apart from the gradient so that it's easier to follow along at home if you're coding alongside. So I have a background of black, and we do see that in the middle of the screen. I'm totally happy with the positioning of it. Obviously, we need to address the opacity. That looks good to me. I like how the gradient shines through here. And then we'll do a border radius of 10 pixels. Great, looks awesome. So now I need to overlay the actual terminal where all of the good stuff will be happening. Oops. Not sure how I did that. If you know, let me know in the comments. So we'll grab our terminal selector, and I am seeing that these are going to be exactly the same. So I'll pull these out into a class called center. Just dump those in there, and then on each of these, you can do a class of center. Now here, I have a background color of transparent, and border radius won't matter. Opacity of 1 is default, and then I think I'm just going to want some padding. I'll try 1 EM, and then I'll throw some test content here. You can see that there. So that's positioned pretty nicely. So again, we have basically 2 sections positioned in the exact same place. The one further back has an opaque background, opaque black background, letting the gradient through, and then the transparent one is overlaid over top. And just to be super explicit, I am going to z-index the terminal to 10 so that it is ahead of the window. Great. So now we need a place to actually type our commands. I was doing some thinking before I started this. I know that I can't actually use an input command because I want to be able to prefix all of my inputs with a sort of cool path like this. And inputs can't have before pseudo selectors, which is how I'm going to accomplish this. So I think I need to use a span that you can actually type in. And then that will let me do this sort of cool trick. So I'll show you now what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and make a new component, and this will just be called a terminal input.svelte. Oops. That's a folder called components. And then inside here, I have terminal input.svelte. We need our script. Lang equals TypeScript. Grab our styles down here. And then the actual content, put test content here. And then we can import that component just like that. When the terminal spins up for the first time, we know we're going to want an input right away. So we can pre-render that like this. And if we come back to our application, we can see test there. It's gray, but it is there nonetheless. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable called terminal input, and it is of the type an HTML span. I'll set it to null at first. Then I can use the bind this keyword, use curly brackets, pass in the terminal input. So now this variable is bound to this span. So I could easily use the variable and get the inner HTML of the span or the inner text, for example. Next, I need the span to be content editable to true. So now we should be able, it's going to be difficult to click in there, so I probably won't be able to. I'll put something here. So now I can highlight that, get in there, and I can type what I want. We'll keep that there, and we'll quickly do some styling because it looks really bad. We'll do a color of lime for the terminal colors. We want to get rid of that weird outline it had too. So there we go. That looks pretty good. Next, I do want to automatically focus the area, the input. You're not allowed to do this anymore. If I bring up my problems here, you can see that we have to avoid using autofocus for accessibility reasons. I'm sure it would still work. Let's see, I'll refresh here, and then I can type right away, refresh, type. But we'll stick to a better method, which will be using the focus command. So whenever the a component is first mounted, the very first thing it calls that we want to use is the onMount function. Now, this is a life cycle hook. And like I said, it's the first thing that will be called so we can run some initial code. And all I want to do as soon as this component is built is focus it right away. Give me access to that. So I'm going to just clean this up a bit. And that should just work. So if I come back here, refresh, I'm automatically focused on that. We're just going to get rid of this something here. So refresh, and I can type right away. Cool. That's great. It's looking good. Next, let's go ahead and add this path style thing. So we'll come down here and we'll grab span before. And befores always need a content. So if we do this kind of thing, this should just work right away. See, and we can type, and if we delete, it doesn't get rid of the content because it's in the before pseudo element. So that looks good, and that works kind of as intended. However, something cool I recently learned is that you can store stuff in data attributes. So we can use data dash and then the name of the attribute. I'm just going to call it path. And I'm going to set this to the value I want. And we'll just have it as development slash. And then down here in the span, before in the content, we can actually use adder, then pass in the name of the data attribute, which is path, data dash path. And here we see the same result. But this is actually pulling this data attribute and chunking it in there. So now that looks great. Okay. I'm not liking the font, which I'll address before we end the video. But next, I want to add some sort of indicator as to where we can type. So for that, I think I'm going to use an after tag. So let me just think about this for 1 second. I believe I can do span after. That up a bit. We always need content in these tags. I'm going to use a period because I don't think I can use a space. No, a space won't render. So I'll put a period and we can see the period there. Now to make it look like a rectangle, all I can do or have to do is use a background color and it should fill in the entire height and width. And if I match the colors of the period and the background color, you won't be able to tell a difference. So now it just looks like one solid block. Next, I do want it to flash, to blink slowly. So for that, we are going to need a keyframe animation, but I am just really not good at these. So we'll head over to W3 Schools and we'll grab the syntax and paste it here. So we'll call our animation blink and it will do an opacity of 1 to an opacity of 0 repeatedly. And inside our after, we can specify an animation of blink. We want it to go forever, smoothly, and over 1 second. So now we have this sort of blinking cursor, and it will always be there because we're using the after tag. One thing I'm noticing is that having the path be the same color as the text isn't great. So we will change the color of the before. And I'm thinking purple might be a little too on brand with the background. We'll try dark orchid. No, that's way too hard to read. Maybe just coral. Coral for now. I'm fine with that. It doesn't look great. Maybe later I'll find a better color, but we'll stick with coral for now. And our green text. So as far as visuals is concerned, we're nearing the end here. I'm going to jump over to Google Fonts and quickly import a nice font. We could always use Roboto, but I do like one called XO2. So I think we will grab, I don't want to download it. No, cancel. We don't need many styles. We need one, and I think I'm just going to try light. Although we might need more styles, so I'll grab light, regular, and bold, and use it as an import statement. We'll grab this import here, come over to our global.css, and we'll chuck it at the top like that. And then we'll grab this CSS rule for font family, and we will overwrite the default and make it XO2. So this should look different. Yeah. Cool. I like the way this looks a lot better. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of letter spacing across the entire thing of 2 pixels. It looks a little, it's kind of futuristic, just different. I think I'm good with that. Yeah, cool. So to recap, we set up our gradient, we set up our 2 overlaid windows. One is opaque with the gradient shining through. One is transparent with the actual terminal commands sitting inside of it. We have our terminal input with our before tag, with our path, and then we have our blinking cursor using the after tag. So I think that's everything I'm going to do here for episode 1. If you're interested in episode 2, let me know with a comment or like or whatever method you so choose. If you like the content so far, go ahead and subscribe and get notified of upcoming videos. In episode 2, I don't exactly know how I'm going to move forward with the project, but we're going to start with accepting basic commands and detecting user input. So hopefully you're looking forward to that. And I will see you in the next video.